What you are about to watch is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute any type of advice. Always question the validity of what you see and what you hear. Viewer discretion is advised.
Today in Tyranny 220, we're going to talk about a very important topic. When you're working with a tyrannical system, there will be plenty of competition. You will meet some characters who will do anything and everything to ensure that you fail and that they are the ones who become the top dogs in the game. Your task and the topic of today is about how to capitalize from the failures of others. Remember our video on the 48 laws of power? We did a series of very short videos and also a long one. One of the laws of powers is to guard your reputation at all costs. Another one was to move to bold action. It stipulates that some mistakes you can come back from, while others will mark the end of your career. You want to guard your reputation and be seen as the guy who is brave and takes risks in order to overcome adversity. You want your supporters to think of you as one of them who has taken the risks for them and that you will represent them and the challenges that they are facing in life. When people hold that type of outlook on you, they defend your name when opponents criticize you. They will point out that you are human, prone to make mistakes, and that the fact that you take action already puts you ahead of those who just talk but never show any action. What you don't want to come across is as foolish or ignorant, taking risks that have no win, making stupid decisions, or embarrassing yourself. No one wants to elect an idiot as their hero. That has never worked out, and honestly, it never will. One thing that you must sustain yourself is to keep close eyes on everyone around you who holds power. If you witness any of your allies making a mistake or about to make a mistake, privately point it out with the exchange of the acknowledgement, "You owe me one" type of deal. In this line of business, nothing is for free. In fact, it is allowed power to be repulsed by what appears to be a free lunch, because the reality about the world of power is that everyone in this game wants something. Anyone who pretends to be providing a free lunch is usually the biggest of all thieves and scammers. Check those types of individuals with extreme suspicion when you meet them. In my childhood days, I met a preacher who was the free lunch giver. He would be patient with his strategy. He would start with free lunches just to make the invitation to church, make him feel welcome, and then tell him that the church was their home, then get him to join the church as official members with baptisms and celebrations. And next thing you know, he would take him to the cleaners with 10% of their income. The person who would process the dues in the form of offerings and tithing shared with my dad that some of the churchgoers actually had very well positions. The congregations housed a bit over 100 members, and the total monthly collected was well over $30,000. That was a small church, by the way. The building that was rented at a very discounted cost because the landlord was a believer and he just charged enough for him to have a bit of spare money, as he called it. He was a man who was very well off. The person who tracked the money also mentioned that the pastor would usually report about $12,000, so on paper it looked like he was barely getting by and that the church only had enough to pay its rent and its bills. My dad mentioned to the guy that he wanted to attend church or even a synagogue because it wasn't any better. This man also informed my dad that he didn't really like the church either, but he would get his cut out of the money, and although it wasn't as much as what the pastor was taking, it was enough for him to treat it as a part-time job. In today's standards, it would have been considered a side hustle. The reason why I'm mentioning this story is because this man had figured the church system out. He did his share of mistakes. He was a hard-working mechanic early on, loved to drink, and made the mistake of helping his buddy beat up a guy at a bar over a joke about mentals being for unmanly men. I'm sure that he used a much harsher term, but the point is that they gave a cigarette to a guy at the bar who proceeded to make fun of him and his friend for smoking what he categorized as weak man cigarettes. Granted, this guy should have been a bit more respectful, but he happened to be drunk, so they decided to give him a good bruising and remind him where his parents, as well as their parents, had failed him. For what I heard, they kicked the guy for a while, a bit more than necessary, so the prosecutor didn't take it lightly. And to top things off, it was re-election time and the DA was on fire and knew he was going to be re-elected, since he was on a journey to show that he was about bringing justice. In other words, prosecute as much as possible. These guys got the book dropped on them rather quickly too, since the prosecutor showed up guns blazing, and didn't even have to take it to trial. They pled guilty because their public defender was so intimidated that he probably quit his career after the DA mopped the courtroom with his carcass. So now the pastor struggled hard in prison, since he realized he wasn't as tough as he thought he was. He did learn something powerful though. He met a pastor who was preaching inside bars, and this pastor had an air of not only being very knowledgeable but also very astute. He had convinced donors to fund his projects, and his outreach was much more successful than other programs that were operating in prison. He was even able to help the inmates secure work in prison, convince the prison to let the vendors provide work opportunities to the inmates. He also carried himself as a man of hard work, desire to succeed, and very respectful. His point of argument was that if inmates did not develop productive skills, they returned to jail, which he actually had very good point, so the system ate it up and let him do his work on his terms and when he pleased. He went as far as finding jobs for inmates when they would get out of prison, so the community loved him. His inmates would work hard and would last in the workforce since they didn't have much of an option due to their criminal record, and they were actually work ready by the time they got out. Honestly, these inmates were well paid when they were out, so I think that they actually liked that they were making a living. He also helped run a very decent sized congregation who had pretty much everyone constantly donating to the church. The car he drove and his home clearly showed he was built for this craft. When this particular inmate was in after the mistake he made of beating the guy in prison, he knew who he wanted to be like when he grew up. He got close to the pastor, asked him to train him on Bible studies, public speaking, convincing people to convert, and how to raise capital. The pastor knew that this man had caught up onto what he was doing, but instead of being concerned, he was impressed that someone actually cared to understand the level of power that he wielded. He shared with the inmate that carrying the word of God was not an easy win, and neither was leading the public. But if he was ready to undergo a series of trials and tribulations, he may work just fine. The inmate was super attentive, steered away from all trouble, worked on one of the hardest projects they had on the insides, which was an outbound sales call center. Believe it or not, many telemarketing calls actually come from the inside. This was his most difficult task because he was also expected to not only study the Bible, but some of the most advanced commentaries on the Bible, which quickly leveled up to his expertise in self-learned theology. He performed extremely well in sales that he was moved as a trainer and then as an assistant to the manager, who was a major decision making in the marketing company he was working for. He was able to interview and pick the best performers just based on how they navigated the interview process. He was notorious for conducting challenging interviews, but that strategy allowed him to pick those who could sell themselves highly. The inmate did his years, and when he got out, he was offered a job in the company as a field manager with a handsome compensation package and even a company vehicle. The pastor who had took him in was still his mentor, and he advised him to reject the offer. The former inmate was appalled and did not understand why he was advising him to do that, since he had worked so hard, and this was the opportunity he had been dreaming of. The pastor told him, "Take the job then. Keep dreaming small and stop contacting me. I thought you wanted to make it big, but I guess your disappointment and waste of my time." The inmate immediately picked up his cell phone and told the company that he was offered a better opportunity somewhere else. The company tried to convince him to take the job by offering him much more than the initial offer, but he did not take the offer. He emotionally beat himself up, but the pastor shared with him that he had made the right choice. The pastor let him stay in the basement of another man he knew, and the former inmate immediately felt stupid because he could have had his own apartment, but now he had nothing. The same week, the pastor found him a job in a rundown used car lot where he informed him to hustle up and make enough to pay the first month of rent. The former inmate was furious but suspended judgment because he was a con and he could sense the con artist in the pastor was, and that he was up to something. It took no time before he realized that he was in a nest of snakes where the salesmen were the worst, and if you let it happen, they would steal your clients, put their arm next to your shoulder so that they will claim teamwork and take part of your commission. He also knew where he came from and what he learned in the telesales job while living with the heartless inmates who would destroy whomever smelled like weakness. He elbowed his way through the company, and although he hated that place, he managed to save enough to purchase a car. He shared with his mentor how much he had saved and where he was planning to go purchase a car, but his mentor asked him for the money because he was going to take him shopping. He asked for clarity, what? And the mentor said, did I stutter? Don't make me ask you again. Let's go get your money and give it to me. The former inmate agreed and handed him the money, immediately worrying about another harsh test taking place soon. What happened next was jaw-dropping because his mentor took him shopping and got him a new Lexus. His mentor shared with him, you could have said no all those times that I chose to test how tough your skin was. Yet you kept your mouth shut and let me lead you without questioning and without hesitation. Here's the title to your new car, all paid for. The former inmate was shocked and excited. He knew his mentor was up to something and that he was someone. What his mentor proposed was just as shocking. He went back to the rundown dealership and told the former inmate to go in and tell his now to become former boss to go screw himself and that he had quit. He didn't even flinch and went to carry his task. His manager laughed at him and told him, I see the pastor put you up to this. Keep your mouth shut, take notes, and do what he tells you. You are going places. I own this place because of him. The former inmate was so amazed at the amount of power this pastor actually carried. Inside, the pastor was known as a gentle human, but out here, he was a vicious leader. His mentor took him back to the dealership where he got the Lexus, walked inside the office of the manager, and with a receptionist chasing him, asking him if he had an appointment, the mentor proceeded to indicate with his hand movement to the receptionist to walk back to where she came from. The manager nodded in approval and apologized to the mentor by letting him know that she was new, but that he was going to have a word with her later. The mentor told the manager to give the former inmate a job because the gentleman was going to be the best salesman he was going to have. The manager agreed and even said that he would start training him the next day and would give him till the end of the week to fill out the application. He handed him keys to a car and told him that was going to be his company car and that only the top 5 performers get that perk. He was number 5 until he would prove that he was worthy of a higher spot. He was shocked that the manager handed him the keys to a car without even knowing his name, just because his mentor had ordered that. He asked the mentor why the company car if he already owned a Lexus. His mentor told him for 2 reasons. Because this one comes with free gas, and I found it kind of annoying that you were crying about a company car when you rejected the sales gig when you got out of prison. The former inmate said nothing and remembered that at all times he was to listen and never outshine his master. Sure enough, with time he proved to be number 1 in that dealership and amounted a very decent amount of money. He moved from the basement to a condo and thanked his mentor with a very expensive bottle of cognac. His mentor told him that that day was a very special day because that day a new opportunity was going to appear in his life. He told him that the next day they were going to go together to put his immediate resignation. The former inmate tried to tell him that he had been saving to buy a house, but instead he bit his words and agreed to the arrangement. The next day they took an expensive bottle of wine and went dressed up to see the manager at the car dealership. They had a drink with him and the manager looked at the former inmate. It was great having you on the team. Keep the car for the weekend. I will have someone pick it up at your place of residence on Monday. Listen to what the pastor tells you. I am in this position because of him. The inmate thanked the manager and they moved on. Then the pastor told him that he was ready for the next stage in his career. The pastor was going to teach him everything he knew. Oddly enough, the pastor had input in several businesses where he acted as a consultant, trained the former inmate, and allowed him to have all those accounts. The pastor shared with the inmate that he was retiring to a very nice place in Florida because he had earned more money than what him and his family could spend. He told him that the prison program was going to be run by someone else from the church, but he didn't think he was going to be successful anymore because the former inmate will not be allowed to preach inside due to his felonies, but that it shouldn't be more of a problem with everything else. The pastor shared with him that he was going to appoint someone else as the pastor of the congregation, someone with many weaknesses. His last task was to exploit those weaknesses and find a way to take him off the throne and take his position. The pastor was planning to visit the congregation from time to time until the former inmate was to take over the church. Sure enough, the guy was a complete mess. He was rude, arrogant, exploited the congregation in a very sloppy way, and treated them with cruelty. He stared at the woman with lust. engaged in encounters with prostitutes, and stole from the church in very obvious and sloppy ways. The former inmate watched several members of the congregation stop attending. He knew this was his greatest opportunity before the congregation completely fell apart. He talked to most active members who attended regardless of the mistreatment. He shared that he wanted to restore the congregation to its former state of love and family where God dwelt with them. Several of the members agreed to go with him and approached the members who were no longer in attendance. Sure enough, those members shared with him that the new pastor was the reason that they were no longer attending. They even found a prostitute this pastor was dating, and she agreed to stop the wrongdoing if someone gave her a job and a place to stay. The former inmate agreed that if they helped him take over the church, he would show mercy on the former stripper and give her a job with the church and a place to stay. The church united with the former inmate, and they confronted the former pastor and asked him to leave. He tried to stand up, but the crowd was very intimidating, so he walked away, blue in anger. The former inmate knew that he had to crush his opponent till the end, so he informed him that he was permanently trespassed and he will file a police report to make it official. He informed him that if he ever dared step in that church, they would contact the police and let him know about his solicitations for prostitution. He pointed at the prostitute and said, "And someone knows all your dirty secrets and has evidence against you." The now former pastor said nothing and knew he would not be able to get up from this one. The mentor showed up, introduced the former inmate to an accountant who was to be his treasurer, who also now owned one of the mentor's businesses in exchange to back up the congregation in exchange for pay. He had a word with the former stripper, and she was able to convince some of her friends to switch from stripping to the church business. At no time, many men started attending, and some even married the former strippers. The congregation grew strong, and this is how the former inmate learned from mistakes of others who were too distracted, too self-centered to see an opportunity when it was in front of them. He knew that the best mistakes you learn from are the ones that you learn from others. I hope today's class was enjoyable. Before I go, I want to share with you about Freedom 320, which is an incredible class that goes beyond the basics and into the application of understanding and finding freedom. No promises here, but this could be a great opportunity. Also, our sponsors at Awaken ABA are here to show us how to shift our stages of consciousness. They are not fake gurus or some online school with little to offer. They're licensed by the state of Oregon and are now taking out state students. Check them out. Links are found in the description. Until next time.